let's talk about program organization. The add function as it appears outside the class. Here we have a function. So let's look at this. It has a return type of time, which is that class, the class that it's coming from. It has a return type of the time class, and it has a parameter of a time object, and it's named add. Okay, so this is the implementation as if it were inside the header file. So if you had defined this inside of the class, you do not need to let that class know that it belongs to it, since it's inside of it. So if something is in your house and it was given to you, okay, obviously if it's not yours, it's not yours, but if it was given to you, you know that because it's in your house, it belongs to you. It's yours. Functions need a way of being defined outside of the class because there are often situations that you cannot put your function inside of your class because it's too big. It's too complex. It needs to be put outside of the class, but we still want it to belong to the class. So what we do is we use what's called a scope operator. And this, the two colons here is the scope operator. And we're saying scope this add function, scope it back to the time class. And if you do that, as long as you have a prototype or a declaration of that function within the time class, then this will work just fine. That's how you know that it is a time class function that belongs inside the time class, but there was no room for it, or the programmers didn't want to define it as an inline function, which is what this is. Technically, this is called an inline function. It is defined inline inside the class. So don't get freaked out though. The only different element of this is what's highlighted. So we still have that same time return type. We have an add name and a time to parameter. So it's really the same. All we're doing is adding this one little caveat that says scope this function back to the time class. Can your class have a small function inside of it? It can. We just saw that. So how small usually do we want to allow that function to be? I personally do not like to have functions that have more than 4 lines in my class definition. But the rule of thumb says about 7 lines. If you start to get to that amount, it's time to move your function to the .cpp file. So it is a gray area. There's no hard rule. Nobody... and wherever you are employed or however you decide to program, that's where they're going to make that final call. But it is common rule of thumb to keep large functions out of header files or outside of your class specification. So again, just going over the organization, the class scope. When it's defined in the class, we have our class foo, our public function, or our public declaration saying that these members are going to be public, good for the client to use, and then it just looks like a normal function. We have a return type, our name, and our definition. Then we move over here to the function defined outside of the class, and here we have class foo, so same class instantiation here, and then we have a public visibility keyword again. And then instead of defining our function, we have our function prototype. And then outside of our class, so notice this is in the header file over here. This one is. And then in our source file, outside of our class specification, we have that same function defined using the scope operator, scoping it back to the foo class with the same return type. So, and then obviously your function definition. So this is just a way of organizing your program.